Hey, welcome back to that 70s card show. I'm your host, John Keating, and I thank you for joining me as I take a look back at the cards and the culture of the very colorful 1970s. We'll revisit a more simple time in our hobby by taking a deep dive into the sets and the stats with a generous amount of dad facts sprinkled in. That 70s card show is currently sponsored by nobody. If you have a comment or suggestion, I urge you to drop me a line at that 70s card show at gmail.com. That 70s Card Show on YouTube or 70s Card on Twitter. This is episode 57, and we are in the thick of Independence Day celebrations. I remember I've discussed candidly before about the 1976 All-Star Game in Philadelphia, which I was able to attend as a 8-year-old. And I remember 76 very well because Valley Forge, an area I grew up near, hosted people from all over the country celebrating our nation's bicentennial. Gerald Ford, our president, spoke at Valley Forge Park. There was fireworks and Conestoga wagons and all sorts of fun stuff that we celebrated the birthday of the country, or the 200th anniversary, I should say. The bicentennial is what they call that. Independence is a pretty unique thing. I know we're going through some stuff right now here in America, and hopefully we can understand that any document written by man may be faulty or have faults within it. Concepts are great, but nothing is written in stone, which is what most of us are told throughout our lives. So we need to understand that that pertains to documents written by man as well, living, breathing documents. So hopefully we can all find a place together where we can just have fun, get along, and be cordial and courteous to each other and live side by side in harmony, uh, kind of in the middle of the road somewhere, maybe. But that's that. So, independence, again, I've had an interesting month myself outside of the hobby. I was faced with the possible change in jobs. I was very humbled to receive an offer from another firm doing something similar to what I do now, a little bit more focused on one aspect of what I do now. And there were no mysteries to that, whatever that new job would be, as I had done some work for them previously before taking my current position. Very happy where I am now, but obviously, when somebody flatters you with praise as well as uh, a substantial raise in your income, it makes you think. So, fortunately for me, it takes several people to tango, I guess, in this instance. So, my current employer kind of stepped in and said, "No, you're staying here because this is what we're going to do for you." And it worked out fine. So, what does that mean? Why am I talking about that on that 70s card show? Well, one of the fun things about the 1970s that often gets overlooked, and the impact that it has today in not only baseball but sports, is free agency. And without some of the events that happened in the 70s, these guys would not be turning down $350 million contracts that we see being turned down by certain players. And I don't necessarily blame those players, but those players also should probably maybe understand the history where this all came from. And I don't need them to take a hit on their lifestyle because of what somebody was not able to earn 50, 60 years ago. But I think it's fascinating that how far we've come in my lifetime. I was born in 1968. How far we've come in my lifetime with the salary situation in professional sports. So, let's go back to 1969. A gentleman named Curt Flood, who, I'm going to say it right now, I've been on record saying should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame, um, for uh, for one particular reason, and that reason obviously being his impact he had on the rights of baseball players to play out their contracts, and become free agents eventually. Obviously, baseball owners owned the players. I know it's a dicey vernacular to say own the players, but uh, essentially they own the players. We all have heard about the reserve clause, and some players have been able to get around it over the last, where I guess previous to 1970, throughout the 20th century. Some players were able to get around it. Obviously, some players created tremendous income for their team, so they were treated a little bit different than your average Joe would have been treated, all the way up to 1970, from the dawn of the 1900s all the way up to 1970. Curt Flood was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies following the 1969 season. Now, Curt Flood, up to that point, he was 30 years old in 1968. Probably had a good 6 years ahead of him, right? At that point, he had about 1,800 hits, was around a career 290s hitter, mid 290s, and several-time world champion, great center fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals. Got 200 hits a couple times, and 190 hits or 191 hits as well. So anyway, he was a baller, right? Heck of a player. That St. Louis team had kind of the players kind of ruled the roost there. There's some quality players on that team: Lou Brock, Bob Gibson, Curt Flood, etc. And I guess management didn't take kindly to Curt Flood asking for a little bit more money, and he was traded to the Phillies. Now, the Phillies in the late 60s were horrible, and without any prospects of getting any better anytime soon. So Curt Flood has gone on the record saying, disparaging things about Philadelphia, and I don't blame him for that. I think the stuff that I read, mostly it was, a lot of it had to do with, some of it had to do with racism and the vocalness of the Philadelphia crowd. But that really, I think that didn't play into it as much as history has said it has. I think his number one reason, he said, was that why should he have to uproot his family and move to a city that he doesn't want to move to? And I can understand that. I don't begrudge Curt Flood for not coming to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a wonderful town, and don't begrudge him for that. But I completely empathize with having to, on the whim of an owner, uproot your family and move somewhere else that you're not familiar with. His feelings were a little hurt as well by being notified by some mid-level club employee instead of the GM or the owner. So Curt kind of had a little bee in his bonnet, and he was not happy about the situation. So he challenged it, right? And we most of us have heard about the situation and his Supreme Court challenge to the reserve clause. And one of the sad things I find is that none of the players or active players at the time would support him publicly or testify on his behalf or whatnot. So, but with that said, he did have the support of the union, and the union did finance his court case against Major League Baseball. So eventually, he was. I believe he lost all the challenges all the way up to the Supreme Court, or he lost at the Supreme Court, whatnot. So, but the work was done there. The damage was done. Curt Flood would kind of lay low and stay out of baseball in 1970. And then, although we do have a 1970 Phillies Curt Flood Topps baseball card, of course, it's one of those ones where we see the brim of his cap, the underneath of his cap. So, and it's red, so they didn't need to do any airbrushing there from his Cardinals uniform. And then we have a 1971 Senators card, which would be his last active card. Now, I sat out 70, and then he was offered, I guess the owner of Washington Senators offered him or the Phillies a way out, or the Cardinals a way out, whomever owned his rights. I think it was the Cardinals at the time. Who knows? Anyway, he went to spring training for the Senators after essentially fighting his case for a year and being out of baseball and all that stuff. So tried to catch on with the Senators, didn't work out. I think he lasted April and then bailed out. Ted Williams was his manager there, and Ted Williams was patient with him, but there's only so much he could do. After sitting out in 1970, came back, played 13 games, 40 plate appearances, batted 200 for the Senators, and then just walked away. Now, Curt Flood was kind of like he was, the personal toll and the professional toll. The professional toll was obvious, but he spent most of the 70s and part of the 80s wandering around the world looking for a place to drown his sorrows. Businesses failed. He had personal issues with family, child support, whatnot, even though some of that may have started before his challenge, Supreme Court challenge. But he kind of wandered the wilderness for a decade and a half, maybe even 2 decades. Alcoholism, drugs, all that stuff. So it took its professional toll, but personal toll even more. Most of us have seen Ken Burns' baseball documentary. And of course, by that time in the mid-90s, Curt Flood is recovered from his alcoholism and eloquent speaker on the history of the sport, especially the time, 60s and 70s. So I think that this gentleman, for what he did, deserves to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Obviously not as a player, although had he continued to play another 6 to 7 years, he probably would have had a pretty good case there as well. But, these are the kind of things that built baseball, stories like this. And there was a toll that was taken. And unfortunately, Curt passed away in the late 90s. But I think the man deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And it's not, if you stop to think about it, maybe, maybe you'll agree with me. Maybe you won't agree with me, and that's fine. But it really is an interesting story nonetheless. Now, baseball continued to, even after this lawsuit, unsuccessful suit by Curt Flood, baseball continued the folly of pretending that baseball players were being treated great and all is well, and this is the national pastime, and everybody loves playing baseball, no matter whom they're playing for. But that wasn't the case, right? So Topps was kind of an enabler here, and what I'm going to talk a little bit about here as well in this episode is how Topps kind of helped enable the situation. And we see in the 70s our first traded sets. They're what would be considered modern day update sets, but these are baseball players that got traded through various means, and kind of the evolution of that through these 3 sets. 2 of them are complete subsets, and I guess all 3 are, but we'll start with 72, right? 1972 is an interesting little beast because that set, I'm 12 cards away from completing that set. I have all 7 of the traded cards, which came in the elusive last series of Topps cards and featured players that were already in the regular set in previous releases of the 72 set. So we have Steve Carlton, who was traded from the Cardinals to the Philadelphia Phillies. We have Joe Morgan, who was traded from the Houston Astros to the Cincinnati Reds. Denny McLain was traded. I don't know where he was traded from. Let's see, because Denny McLain at that point was a bit of a... Well, he wasn't at that point. He was probably his whole life, but truly at that point, he was a straight-up knucklehead. So let me look at a little Denny McLain stuff here. I kind of despise Denny McLain just because of what he was off the field. But anyway, the back of his card says he came from the Texas Rangers to the Oakland A's. Essentially, nobody wanted Denny McLain after he left the Tigers in the late 60s. He was just a straight up embarrassment to everybody. Anyway, enough of him. Let's go back to Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson went to the Dodgers. And of course, Frank Robinson needs no introduction because just a brilliant player for the Reds, and then the Orioles, champion, all that stuff. Triple Crown winner in 66 for the Reds. So Frank Robinson, great player. Jim Fregosi was traded to the New York Mets. and he's depicted in his new Mets uniform. He left from the California Angels. And then Rick Wise was traded for Steve Carlton. So Rick Wise went from the Phillies to the Cardinals. And then, of course, we have Jose Cardinal, who everybody wanted to know where he was going. And in turn, I guess they needed to have a card to celebrate his trade. I think he went from the Padres to the Cubs, and neither one of those teams was very good at that time, and nobody really cared. So these 772 cards, all the players are depicted in their new uniforms without airbrushing, obviously taken in spring training of 1972. And again, these were released later on in the season. I would imagine maybe early summer. What I find fascinating about this is the cards follow sort of the same pattern as your standard 1972 cards, but there's no team name on the front like there would be for the traditional players. So the arch is still there. The 2 stars are still there on either side of the arch, but no team name, former or present. And a big kind of like a prison stenciled stamp that says traded on the front. Now, most of these guys here, I'm going to speak for the alien known as Steve Carlton, Joe Morgan, of course, Denny McClain, probably Frank Robinson, but most of these players were in the mood to go somewhere else, whether it was contract negotiations that they were embroiled in or what. So none of these trades were out of the kindness of any owner's heart to have their player move to greener pastures. It's just get rid of these guys. They're troublemakers. So that's that. 7 cards within the normal top set, and they have their own numbers here as well. These aren't T something somethings. These are straight up 750 through I think 756 is the series. So if we look at the backs of these cards, it's going to be a wonderful blurbs about how great these players are and whatnot. Doesn't say anything about, hey, these guys are troublemakers, let's get rid of them. It's just tells you how great everybody is, and so be it. So that's that. Let's talk a little bit about the value there. The 72 value. Okay. Joe Morgan is according to Beckett OPG, Joe Morgan is your runaway leader with the highest value. His card number 752 goes, according to Beckett, $40 to $100, and that's excellent, probably to mint. Steve Carlton comes in at $15 to $40. Frank Robinson, $10 to $25. Denny McClain, $8 to $20. $755 is Jim Fregosi, and that's $6 to $15. Rick Wise, $6 to $15, and Jose Cardinal, $6 to $15. Now, guys like Rick Wise and Fregosi to some extent, and Cardinal, obviously you're paying the high series tax there when buying those cards. Otherwise, the value just wouldn't be there. I mean, you're paying high series tax for all these guys, but Morgan, Carlton, and Robinson are in the Hall of Fame, so their inflated prices are sort of justified. So let's get out of there, and then we're going to move on to the very interesting 1974s. The 1974 season is famous. The Topps set is famous for having a factory set offered by J.C. Penney, and the first factory set that was offered to the public. Not quite sure where the traded set falls into all that, but the traded set was very interesting because this was a full-blown traded set, and it came out. The Topps didn't wait for the players to be in their new uniforms. They just got their they got their pens out and painted the crap out of their hats and uniforms with varying results. But read a little bit about this from Beckett OPG. It says the cards in this 44 card set, of course, measure 2.5 by 3.5. The 1974 Topps traded set contains 43 player cards and 1 unnumbered checklist card. The fronts have the word traded in block letters. And and the backs are designed in newspaper style. Card numbers are the same as the regular set except they are followed by a T. So no known scarcities exist for this set. The cards were inserted in all packs toward the end of the production run. They are produced in large quantity, and they are no scarcer than regular Topps cards. So again, 43 player cards, one checklist. Checklist is a lovely uh, avocado green and front and back. Now the back is the regular Topps green from the 70s, but the design is similar to the regular 74 cards with a banner in the top right that says trades checklist, and then to the left of that in the top left it says Topps 1974 baseball. One of the cool things about this set, this checklist, is it has the player's name, um, obviously the card number, and like I said previously, or that we learned from the Beckett OPG blurb, is that it is the standard set number with the letter T followed. So Craig Robinson is our first guy there, and he is 23T. And then it lists his former team as the Phillies and his new team as the Braves. Now, a lot of these guys were traded for each other. And so it's kind of redundant reading the backs of these cards. Let me see if I can whip out my cards here. But yeah, it's really just again, it feels to me like a little bit of a PR thing about how this is great. These guys were traded. It's everything they always wanted. Most of the players in this traded set are, again, like I said, traded for each other, but they're also kind of scrubs. I'm going to read off the list to you, if you don't mind. I'll read right from the checklist on my screen, if that's okay. Craig Robinson, Claude Osteen, Jim Wynn, good player, right? Going from the Astros to the Dodgers. Bobby Heiss, Ross Grimsley, Bob Locker, Bill Sudeikis, Mike Marshall. Of course, Mike Marshall be a stud for the Dodgers, appearing in over 100 games, I believe. I'm sorry. Nelson Bryles. Oh, man. How do you say this guy's name? Put the glasses on. Aurelio Monteagudo. Okay, so he went to the Phillies. You figure I would know that, but I don't, because I've never heard of the cat before in my life. Went from the Angels to the Phillies. Diego Segui, who seems to have played for every team ever in baseball, including a few maybe hockey teams as well. Willie Davis was traded from the Dodgers to the Expos after a long career at Chavez Ravine. Reggie Cleveland, Lindy McDaniel, Fred Sherman, George Mitterwald, Ed Kirkpatrick, Bob Johnson, Ron Santo, Hall of Famer, traded to the crosstown Chicago White Sox from the Cubs. Barry Lersch, Randy Hundley, Juan Marichal was traded. Juan Marichal was traded from the Giants to the Red Sox. Of course, Juan Marichal is a Hall of Famer as well. Pete Richard, John Curtis, Lou Piniella was traded finally, and from the Kansas City Royals to the New York Yankees. Gary Sutherland, Kurt Bavacqua, a few years away from being world famous. Jim Ray, Philippe Alou, Steve Stone was traded to the Cubs. And who did he come from? He came from the White Sox. So perhaps he was part of the deal with Ron Santo going the other way. Tom Murphy, Horatio Pena, Eddie Watt, Cesar Tovar, Ron Schuler, Cecil Upshaw, Merv Redeman, Luke Walker, Larry Gura, Jim Mason, Tommy Agee, Terry Crowley, Fernando Gonzalez. So that was your big 43 player set from the 1974 traded set. The cards, again, these also follow along the patterns of the regular 74 set. Player shots are all headshots. They are all goobered up with airbrushing and with varying results. I'm impressed with some of them. I'm not so impressed with other ones. Actually, it looks to me like maybe some of these cats were depicted in their new uniforms. I can say that that's probably the case. Oh, no, I lied to you guys. Bob Locker, man, if they airbrushed that, they did a heck of a job. But for the most part, It's like paint by numbers. It's pretty horrible. So yeah, that's that. That's the 74 set. I guess we could talk a little bit about the value of these cards, even though they really don't hold much value. But since we do have a couple Hall of Famers in there, we'll go over that. So according back at OPG, 75 cents to $2 will buy you a fine Juan Marichal. Coming in at second is the non-numbered traded checklist, 60 cents to $1.50. Ron Santo, Hall of Famer, again, going to the Chicago White Sox. His card, number 270T, will run you 40 cents to $1. Lou Piniella, 40 cents to $1. And Philippe Alou, 40 cents to $1. So there's not a lot of value in there. Again, they say it's similar to the regular issue cards of that set. So you're not going to get rich on 74 tops traded. Don't care who you is. Let's move on to 76, right? So 76, big year. Let's talk a little bit about this court case. And this is per the Baseball Hall of Fame website. There was a late 1975 ruling by Peter Seitz, independent arbitrator who was part of a 3-person panel. So guess who the other 2 were? One was from the player's side, one was from the owner's side. So essentially, it was all on this guy's shoulders as to what the ruling would be. So I think it was December 75. Seitz determined that veteran pitchers Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally should become free agents after playing a full season without signed contracts. When Seitz ruled in favor of the 2 pitchers, the Major League Baseball owners panicked. So this was a new thing, and what they did, they allowed the players to become free agents under 2 conditions: that their contracts had expired and that they had accumulated at least 6 years of Major League service time. Marvin Miller, of course, is in the Baseball Hall of Fame, I believe, and one of the reasons he is because of this stuff right here. Not only did he have a big impact on cards and card licensing, but check out the free agency move here he made. He agreed to the 6-year term of Major League service because he figured, and I'll read this, if all players became free agents every year, then they would create an oversaturation of the market and actually compress salaries for all but the superstar players. By producing a system of 6-year free agency, Miller ensured that only a few players would become free each winter. Miller figured that demand would increase for those players, thereby pushing their salaries higher and higher. Miller was right. So that's pretty impressive. There's people that think that way and that can see the future, and Marvin Miller obviously was one of those chaps. So let's read a little bit about the 76 traded set. From Beckett OPG, the cards, again, 44 card set, 43 players, and 1 unnumbered checklist, standard size cards. A Sports Extra heading design is found on each picture and is also used to introduce the biographical section of the reverse. Each card is numbered according to the player's regular 1976 card with an additional T to indicate his new status. As in 1974, the cards were inserted in all packs towards the end of the production run. According to published reports at the time, they were not released until April 1976. Because they were produced in large quantities, they are no scarcer than the basic cards. Reports at the time indicated that a dealer could make approximately 35 sets from one vending case. The vending cases included both regular and traded cards. So I've brought up the entire 44 card set, 43 players, and I'll kind of go over that here in a minute, but it is kind of a rip from the headlines front dealio. Again, no action shots. A lot of airbrushing going on the hats, and yeah, that's that. We're going to look at the checklist here. Now, the checklist was similar to that of 1974, of course, because it was unnumbered. It was lime green on the front. The top left in the blue background says Topps 1976 Baseball, and there's a box next to it that says Traded Checklist, white inside of black. Lime green on the front, little Topps green border around the back with regular grayish paper there. Players featured, starting off with Ed Figueroa would go to the New York Yankees, Dusty Baker, Braves to the Dodgers, Doug Rader, Ron Reed, Oscar Gamble, and I believe, no, that's Ron Schiller I'm thinking of. I thought Ron Reed was traded twice. It's possible that he's in the 74 set too. Should probably look that up, huh? Because I knew Ron Reed started out with them there Braves, but I guess I'm thinking of Barry Lersch and Ron Schiller. So anyway, cancel that, folks. Oscar Gamble, we'll get back to that in a second. Jim Cott, Hall of Famer, went from the White Sox to the Phillies. Jim Spencer, Mickey Rivers from the Angels to the Yankees. Lee Lacy, Rusty Staub. We'll get back to that as well. Larvell Blanks, George Doc Medich, Ken Reitz, Mike Lum, Clay Carroll, Tom House, Fergie Jenkins, Hall of Famer, going from the Rangers to the Red Sox. Darrell Cheney, Leon Roberts, Pat Dobson, and Bill Melton on the front. Now on the back, we get Bob Bailey, Bobby Bonds, who went from the Yankees to the Angels. John Ellis, Mickey Lolich, Ken Brett, Ralph Garr, Bill Singer, Jim Crawford, Morris Nettles, Ken Henderson, Joe McIntosh, Pete Falcone, Mike Anderson, Doc Ellis, going to the Yankees from the Pirates. Milt May, Ray Fosse, Clay Kirby, Tommy Helms, Willie Randolph, who would go from the Pirates to the Yankees. I believe Willie Randolph's rookie card may be in the 76 set as well. Jack Brohammer, Rogelio Moret, and Dave Roberts round out your 43 players changing teams. According to Topps, happily and willingly changing teams that year. Let's look at a few of these highlights here, if you guys don't mind. I've called out Oscar Gamble, who's one of his 76 traded card is one of the most famous cards in the 70s, due to the afro, of course. His 76 regular 76 card is pretty cool too. It's him taking a nice swing at the bat, nice action shot for the Clevebergs, I believe. So we have him. We have Tom House. I've called out because, and I have him depicted next to Fergie Jenkins, both going to the Red Sox. But apparently, different artists had different interpretations of the Red Sox color scheme, as Tom House is clearly depicted with a pink cap with the famous B for Boston, and Fergie Jenkins is depicted in a red cap with the famous B for Boston. So interesting little setup there. Ralph Garr went from I think the Braves to the White Sox, and the reason I've called out his card is he's depicted in a nice red Red Sox hat. They got the color right there. The logo's right. Everything's almost perfect until you realize in 1976, the Red Sox completely changed their color scheme and their uniforms and their logos and all that stuff. They'd be wearing shorts. They'd be wearing blue shirts, white pants, white shirts, blue pants, blue shirts with white collars, white shirts with blue collars, and no stirrups and all that fun stuff. So Ralph Garr never really wore that outfit at all. That that White Sox red logo. So fun little fact there. And then Doc Ellis, of course, his needs no introduction. Anyway, there's that. Now, the back of card number 120T is for Rusty Staub, the Sports Extra, Detroit, Michigan, December 12th, 1975. And it's headlined, La Grande Orange goes to Motor City. So obviously Staub was a big deal in Montreal, and La Grande Orange is called out in the headline, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'll read that to you. It's only one paragraph. The Detroit Tigers have acquired slugger Rusty Staub from the New York Mets in a 4-player trade announced today. Staub is coming off his most productive season with 105 RBIs in 1975 and is expected to rattle the right field fences in Detroit with his line drives throughout the 1976 campaign. So, La Grande Orange, welcome to the Motor City. Let's talk about value of these cards. Willie Randolph, again, he's depicted in his 4-player card, I think for his rookie card with the Pirates in 1976. So Willie Randolph, $2 to $5 for his 592T solo debut, wearing a Yankees uniform. get some pinstripes painted on there, all that stuff. Hall of Famer Fergie Jenkins, $1.25 to $3. The checklist moves down to 3 on this list, 75 cents to $2. And then Dusty Baker, Oscar Gamble, Jim Cott, and Bobby Bonds, all in the $60 to $50 range. Here, the overall value of these cards, these 44 cards, is $32.20 with an average value of $73. If you were to have a complete set of 44, they price it from $12.50 to $30 on the Beckett OPG. Again, very little value other than to complete the set. So that's that. Yeah, so I'm by the time you guys listen to this, I will have well, you know what, before we get out of here, let's talk about the free agency, because free agency got a little murky there, right? So even though Messersmith and McNally were declared free agents, Messersmith was still pictured in 1976 in his Dodgers card. McNally, oddly enough, had retired midway through the 75 season and lent his name to the cause, never intending to play in 76, but lent his name and his, all that stuff to the cause. So him and Messersmith were granted free agency in 1975. Messersmith would, if I'm not mistaken, let me see if I can find old Andy Messersmith here. Figured I'd be better with this stuff. Messersmith would go on to play in Atlanta in 1976. So he signed a free agent contract there, not depicted in the traded set. And he's depicted in his Dodgers card in the 76 set. So, they're not opening their arms widely to free agency. I'm not quite sure when he signed with the Braves, but Andy Messersmith was a pretty good pitcher for both the California Angels and the Dodgers. In fact, he had a sub-3 career ERA and won 20 games a couple times, stuff like that. But he would go 11-11 for Atlanta and just kind of fade out. That was his 30-year-old season, his age 30 season, but he would never be the same. So perhaps it took a professional and personal toll on him as well. Again, McNally would retire. And I guess somebody over there on the other side of this talking wire is wondering about Jim Hunter and Catfish Hunter, who left the Oakland A's after the 1974 season and was granted free agency to sign with the Yankees in 1975. Well, old Catfish, and that's what I call James Augustus Hunter, old Catfish got out of it via a loophole where his agent had corresponded with A's owner Charlie Finley. And we know Charlie Finley was a bit of a rascal. And the loophole was that per his contract, Hunter was not paid certain deferred payments. So a judge granted him free agency for the 1975 season due to, I guess, a default on the contract by Charlie Finley. So that's how that happened. Sometimes looking back, we look at Jim Hunter as the free agent or the first free agent. Now, he was granted free agency, but it wasn't by the traditional manner that players would be, or the traditional route that players would follow later on, due to the Messersmith and McNally ruling. Free agency in the other sports would take a while. I seem to remember Wilbur Marshall being a big deal with his free agency. Hockey, I think, ended maybe in the early 90s. Free agency or full free agency was granted per various stipulations. And Tom Chambers in 88, I think, was a Seattle Sonics player who was granted free agency in his own right. And I believe he was the first NBA player to play out a deal. I think it was you had to go through 2 contracts and be in the league X amount of years, and then you could be a free agent. So Tom Chambers did it there. But of course, I harken back to Curt Flood as the man who kind of opened up the floodgates, which is ironic, right? But I think he's the guy who made it happen, paid a tremendous price, and every player in every sport should be indebted to him because he really made it happen and stuck his neck out on the line to make it happen. So that's that. That's free agency. That's Curt Flood. That's independence. And by the time, like I was about to say, by the time you guys listen or watch this, I will be on a plane over to England, kind of maybe petitioning the Queen to let us back into the realm, because I think we've been bad boys and girls over here. So we might need to sit on the naughty chair or the naughty step for a little while. But anyway, wonderful, wonderful trip through the early 70s and free agency there. It's a sticky subject, but I'm glad we got to get it out of our system. Glad it kind of ties in with my opinion of independence and what I've gone through personally over the last month, and having the right to go wherever I want, work wherever I want. So, pretty darn cool. So thanks for joining me this week in my journey back in time. If you have a comment or suggestion, reach out to me as usual at ThatSeventiesCardShow at gmail.com. That 70s Card Show on YouTube, and 70s Card on Twitter. We are being played off as usual by the very patriotic Mango Safari. And as always, enjoy your collecting, and more importantly, enjoy your collection. Be safe. Hopefully have enough fingers to sort cards next week, and don't drink and drive. Don't be anything other than a wonderful, peaceful, awesome human being. Take care, everybody. Have a great week, and